All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming back and tuning into today's episode. We have a real treat today. We have Dr. Lazlo Boros with us. He is a retired professor of pediatrics at the University of California in UCLA School of Medicine, co-director of the Stable Isotope Research Laboratory. And he has probably authored and spearheaded over 700 different studies on deuterium. He's also an internationally recognized expert on metabolic water biochemistry. So, Dr. Boros, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, of course.
And it's deuteronomics. I have always messed up that word, but that is really your specialty, correct?
Yeah, this is a scientific field, and in fact, it's a college course now in Amsterdam, in Europe, in the European universities. Now we teach deuteronomics as like genomics or any other field, and it's a 4-credit coursework now, and you can use it for your doctoral degree or thesis. So it became the first. We started at UCLA as special lectures and seminars, and then we moved this to the college education and credit level. So now you can actually earn 4 educational credits if you take the deuteronomics class at the Vrije Universiteit and the Amsterdam Medical School. And it's a transferable credit, so you can transfer this credit in Europe among universities that you attend. But yes, indeed, it's called deuteronomics. Yes.
Wonderful. And this is something that, people that are in the medical field are starting to study more of, or is it just more people that are interested in science, period? What would you say are the type of people that are taking this course?
Well, we do have a course for medical students, and we do have a course for agricultural students. That means they are involved in biology one way or another, and there are about 32 talks and presentations. The course costs about 700 euros, which you can purchase through the Vrije Universiteit, and on my website you can reach information about this course. But it's for medical students and agricultural students, and we teach this also for doctors or doctoral candidates, PhD students, and you can actually join it for your master course and for your after graduate course. So it's practically useful in all fields of biology in general.
Wonderful. And you have a background also in gastroenterology as well as pancreatology, correct? How did you get interested in deuterium from those types of backgrounds that you had previously?
Yeah, so I'm a medical doctor by education and training. I'm not a clinician, though. I do have a research and a teaching background, and I have been involved in clinical research, but not clinical work. And I'm mostly practicing like what is called tracer-based metabolomics. That means we use a glucose molecule that is labeled with a stable isotope of carbon, and we trace the carbons in metabolism, and we kind of interpret the biochemical reaction architectures based on carbon labeling. And we can do this also with deuterium, which is the heavy, like bigger brother of the hydrogen or protons. And because they weigh or they have a different mass, they are heavier, about twice as heavy as protons, very close to that. And they can be measured and followed and traced by mass spectrometers. So this is what we have been using at UCLA. And I was working with various investigators. Dr. Pauly was my mentor at UCLA, just practically interpreting all kind of biochemical scenarios that are related to disease and health. And then we actually transferred the course based on University of California faculty's research and lectures. The lead topic or the lead talk is introduced by Dr. Judith Klinman, who is at UC Berkeley. And she studied deuterium isotope effects for a very long time in her laboratories. And now we gave it a translational or a clinical edge of all the deuteronomics or deuterium research. So it's becoming part of medicine, diagnostics, and therapeutics. And I think that the best is yet to come, simply because there's so many new developments in the field. That's why we call it deuteronomics, because there's so many information and data coming in that it deserved its own name. And simply the effect of deuterium in the living system is so important, both from the functional and from the structural points of view, that practically we just had to devote a devoted field to deuterium kinetic isotope effects. And I think this has just started, and we're going to see many more new interesting developments.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of exploded in the biohacking world in the last couple of years. There's a lot of people talking about it, a lot of people trying it, but I don't know if there's, a lot of scientists that are kind of intervening. I think it's a lot of people experimenting on this side, but I know you've been involved in some trials of actually seeing people with medical issues with cancer and seeing them treated, doing a deuterium depletion, correct?
That's right. I do work with a number of physicians who apply this technology in their practice. The research started in the late 80s, 1980s, early 1990s with deuterium depleted water research and science. There have been very important, critical, basic scientific studies to show how deuterium or deuteronomics would influence the rate of proliferation of, for example, tumor cells. And that goes back to Dr. Gabor Somyai's work. And he's a scientist who has been involved in oncology in the first place. And he was using deuterium depleted water to treat cancer. There were lead studies that he based his research on, or his arguments, very successfully, and they have published a number of papers before I joined the field. I was using our tracer-based technologies, and this is when kind of I joined their efforts simply to position it in the clinic. And I think this was a very critical contribution to be able to determine that actually your mitochondria, or the matrix of your mitochondria, produces this deuterium depleted water. And you can use it as a outside source, as drinking water or potable water, to help your body to deplete deuterium while it is producing matrix water or metabolic water, if you will. And so you can therapeutically, you can use this knowledge and also this combined understanding of mitochondrial functions for metabolic water production and ATP energy production, to use it for clinical applications. And for that matter, this is really truly a very important new development, as being able to medically position deuterium depletion and deuterium depleted water, both from food and also through water or nutrients in general, because eventually the reason why we take in oxygen is to produce this water from hydrogen that comes from food. And this process takes place in the mitochondria. And we are exploring this basic fundamental knowledge in many different aspects of medicine, including diagnostics and therapeutics. And I do work mostly with doctors who apply this in the naturopathic or natural kind of integrative medicine, field of medicine. You may want to go and explore Dr. Petra Dorsman-Devlar's work. She has been applying this deuterium depletion and deuterium depleting methodologies for quite a long time based on clinical scenarios. So, but we also had other doctors and other experimenters who have been using this technology and also the knowledge. Now there are a growing number of companies who supply both water and food for therapeutic purposes. But yes, indeed, it's getting bigger.
Absolutely. And, just for my layperson that's listening, you talked about the mitochondria, you talked about deuterium. How does, in just kind of simple terms, deuterium affect the mitochondria? I know a lot of people are familiar with the concept that, as we get older, after we get about past the age of 25, our mitochondrial function does slow down. We start to see some signs of aging, and it continues on as we get older. So how does deuterium come into play in that process with the mitochondria?
Yeah, so as we talked about in short terms, mitochondria are responsible for moving certain proteins and applying moving parts in the kind of realm of life to support it. And these are nanomotors that are powered by protons or hydrogens, the little brother of deuterium, if you will. And the mitochondria is a specialized organ in the cell that actually I can separate protons and electrons and, for that matter, deuterons. So hydrogens or proton life is practically to recycle protons through water, carbons, and oxygen. And you need energy to break the oxygen-hydrogen bond and synthesize organic molecules. And when you oxidize or you burn these organic molecules, which is like, those are in food, you generate water again. And in the meantime, proton is moved by these delicate machines in the mitochondria. We call them nanomotor or ATP synthase or complex 5. There are various names for these, but the bottom line is that protons have to fit in these nanomotors to give them a charge and start rotating them. They actually rotate at like really breathtaking speed, some 12 to 50,000 rotations per minute if you talk about bacterial nanomotors. But the flagellates, they spin 100,000 rotations per minute. So these are very delicate yet very powerful tools in biology to move or provide the tools how cells are able to generate energy and move along. And for that matter, protons are very critical to drive biology and life and produce the energy that can be processed in biological systems called ATP. This phosphate is a good source of energy for all kinds of physiological processes. Now, deuterium would not fit through this kind of sliding door, or would not fit through these nanomotors, or would not fit through these very specialized little machines, because deuterons are actually much larger. From the chemistry point of view, it's double in size or weight, if you look at the entire deuterium, which is the nucleus and the electron cloud around it, or the electron that spins around it, but it is actually in chemical bondings or chemical bonds, it is actually 8 to 15 times stronger to bind. So it's really not easy to remove it from nanomotors and so on. So they deliver quite a significant damage in mitochondria in the nanomotor system if they get in one way or another, and mostly they get into the food. So because of these very delicate protein structures in our mitochondria, deuterium behaves more like a ball in a china shop. It practically destroys all moving parts and hydrogen-based or proton-based chemical bonds. On the other hand, and this is the new development of deuteronomics, deuterium is necessary to support structures. For example, collagen of bone or connective tissues. And for that matter, and this is a new study from the Karolinska Institute by Dr. Zubarev, who is a very alert and very prominent scientist in the field of deuteronomics. They measured collagen deuterium concentrations about 320 parts per million. And so they did in peregrine falcons that dive down at 360 kilometers per hour in air, and the bone collagen of the gray seal also has very high deuterium levels, but we know these animals are challenged in their lifetime simply because they need very strong bones to perform all the activities that they do. But it seems that deuterium can structurally contribute to tissue durability and flexibility in the meantime, but in the mitochondria, it is really not required because of these very delicate nanomotors. So as we talk about deuterium as part of the food or the water or the nutrients scenarios, we need to stay at the natural low levels to be able to supply the very specific necessities in the cells, which require very little amounts of deuterium, but leave the nanomotors intact, meaning that the body can do its own kind of deuterium slapping or practically distributing or discriminating and fractionating it among various organs and proteins and peptides and amino acids. And two of those amino acids that in collagen are proline and hydroxyproline. We didn't find, or Dr. Zubarev, they didn't find deuterium accumulation in any other molecule. So it seems that deuterium has a very specific role at a very specific place, mostly in connective tissues. Okay. And those tissues lose their own ability to produce energy because their mitochondria, we are talking about cartilages, we are talking about bones, tissues with minerals and proteins connected by proteins. So they are not really moving parts. They are flexible, but really they are not moving or producing energy. And every other cell, for example, liver cells, muscle cells, that are actively produce ATP, ATP, they have to be spared or they have to be protected from the effects of deuterium. So practically, this is, just to sum it up, like in a biochemical approach, yet we need to understand that deuterium at natural abundance and with small variations around it can have major impact in physiology and biochemistry.
Got it. And you mentioned that people are getting a lot of deuterium from food, correct? And
That's right. The food source nowadays, GMO,
glyphosate,
industrial junk, you name it.
seed oils, yeah.
Yeah, I just the list is endless of really we can only, I would say at this point the best is just to stay with natural food
Hmm.
sources, supplies, and natural products of animal meat and interior organs and so on that are grass-fed, meaning that they live in their natural habitat and they live with their peers, with their own species around, meaning that they are just naturally capped and can deplete deuterium, so they are not sick themselves. We just published a paper in Metabolomics, which is a very prominent journal in the field of metabolism, that how different animals or cows are when they are grain-fed or artificially fed in the farming environment, or when they are grass-fed in their natural habitats. And every product that we eat eventually will become part of what we are and who we are. So we need to kind of change this scenario. We are what we eat, as practically we are what we eat and what we can discriminate as far as protons and deuterium for various and very specialized biological, biochemical, and medical mechanisms, meaning that we really have to be aware of this, and we have to be careful of what we eat and how much we eat and when we eat. And what we eat is what's the source of it.
Right. So people should really be cautious about where their food is sourced, understand the farm that the animals were raised on, make sure that they're, if they're eating produce, that it is not sprayed with a bunch of glyphosate, GMO grown. Fruit also has quite a bit of deuterium in it. Is that correct? Like bananas and things like that.
Yeah, but we need to understand, yes, you're right, correct. Fruits are not food. We call them functional food because they are only available, and given particular fruit is only available for a short period of time.
Yes,
Usually.
seasonal.
They are seasonal, and their purpose is to propagate the tree that has the seeds in them. So usually fruits are loaded with deuterium for the microbiome to kind of dwell on it and eventually to release the seeds in the form of fertilizer. And this is why I would get a diarrhea if I would eat a certain type of fruits, because I'm really not used to it, or I'm not. I only eat fruits seasonally.
Yes.
When they are available in the season, in very limited amounts of it, because in nature we would not get to fruits very easily, because we would be competing with animals in the fauna in the same environment, and we are carnivores. So humans are carnivores in that, in looking at their metabolic imprints and all other physiological characteristics. So fruits are not for us. It is very limited. It has very limited kind of nutritional values. They have very limited nutritional values, and so we need to be careful how much and when we eat fruits.
I agree. I've always said that people that say you should eat a lot of fruit have a very poor understanding of deuterium and that if you are going to eat it, it has to be seasonal in a small amount, because in the higher UV, our body has a little bit of a better ability to deplete deuterium. Is that correct?
Yeah, so your body is constantly controlling and redistributing deuterium for where it's needed, for connective tissues and the remodeling of connective tissues. And we don't need much of that. Everything above that will end up as a surplus in our system that our biochemical mechanisms have to get rid of, or have to discriminate, or have to sequestrate, or have to compartmentalize one way or another. And this is the challenge for our body, to constantly shovel deuterium off of protons and not to let them get into the mitochondrial matrix and deliver damage to mitochondria. And our systems, our cells are very smart, very sophisticated in depleting deuterium, especially the matrix, using these nanomotors. And also our gut microbiome, our bacteria, our cell wall transfer processes, proton transfers and substrate transfers, they are all very keen on depleting and controlling deuterium, or shoveling or distributing it to very specific set of biochemical reactions. So for that matter, and this is very true, we have to follow our ancient instinct of really what our ancestors were eating, and were able to live without, significant or devastating chronic, like, degenerative diseases until like a long age. And even if you look around, there are still species and there are individual animals that live for very long times, over 100, 200 years. If you look at a Galapagos turtle, they live 300 years and so on, or at least 200 years. That means they are stuck with their ancient food source, and they don't have artificial feeding compared to cows that are farm raised. They live the most 5 years.
Right.
So they are terminally ill.
Sick. Yeah.
Metabolically, we just reviewed that. And for that matter, I think deuteronomics is going to address all these scenarios, and it's just a matter of time because of the population diseases and epidemiology of many chronic, devastating, debilitating, degenerative diseases, cancer, diabetes, obesity, you name it. Practically, it's just a disaster that's happening to human societies nowadays, and it's based on food, after all.
I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of people that follow me because I healed a lot of problems that I had chronically, eczema and IBS and just joint pain and inflammation at a young age, by just going on a carnivore diet and really just eating meat and fat for a couple of years straight. That's all I ate. I did not have one cheat, and felt better than I had in my entire life. And there's a lot of people now that are very interested in eating a carnivore diet, eating a lot of fat. I think you have to eat the fat. You can't be afraid of it, and just eat the high protein, the bone marrow and the suet and the really good parts of the animal. And people they're seeing all kinds of amazing things take place with their health. So a lot of people that listen to this episode are definitely clued into that. But I still have some of those people that are still having health issues. They're still having metabolic issues, and some of them are struggling. Do you think that's due to perhaps some of the water that they're drinking, or the animals that they're eating may not be the highest quality? What would your thoughts on that be?
Well, yeah, we need to kind of think it over in a very simple way. You are born to this planet in ketosis.
Yes.
And you wake up every morning in ketosis. That's you burn fat to supply your energy and water needs. Yes. And when you are able to deplete deuterium below a certain set point, that's when you wake up. That if you measure your beta hydroxybutyrate in the morning, it's always elevated, and that's the same in babies as
Mhm.
they are born, simply because ketosis or the ketogenic kind of metabolism is our natural kind of metabolic profile, and we can't change that, and we shouldn't. Just like all other species. If you look at birds that eat lots of fruits, they actually don't digest them. They propagate the seeds by simply releasing those sugary and carbohydrate rich and deuterium rich. Deuterium is practically for bacterial growth and prokaryote propagation. Now, as you said, some people still have problems simply because if they get to a fat source, it's not just that you switch to a fatty, or if we look at the anthropology of eating bone marrow, we can go back to almost 4 million years.
Yep.
Because in Ethiopia, that's where they found the first schools and big bones opened by tools in large animals. So the prehistoric man learned how to open up the school of these big, huge plant-eating animals and eat the bone marrow out of their brain, meaning that from their school. So they've been in ketosis and they've been eating a ketogenic diet for millions of years.
Yes.
And there are actually good, but I'm talking about these scenarios because there are publications about these. So on my Facebook and also on my other various platforms, I kind of show this data for, these are good readings and interesting readings, but practically we have been eating bone marrow for millions of years. At least it was part of our diet. If you look at historic writings like the Old Testaments, the most valuable food source was the joint bone of the animal cows. Actually, the old Jewish kings, they paid gold for this part of the animal. So that was the most expensive and the most valuable part of any. It was not the meat, or it was not the, which was surprising to me as well. And it was surprising. That's why we are going back now to ancient literature and Old Testamental correspondence, simply because it seems that Deuteronomics goes back as old as like mankind or humanity. As we find very interesting chemical symbols on the Tataraka disk, which is 7,500 years old. They have been propagating this type of symbolism, at least in the old writing textures, and then it was transferred to Aramean, Hebrew, and other ancient languages. But practically this knowledge, the fifth book of Moses is called Deuteronomy, and which is, I think, and the Old Testament starts with fractionating protons from deuterium by the Spirit of God hovering over the waters, which is the physical phenomenon, how you separate protons from deuterons. So from the scientific point of view, you can apply this knowledge both in a kind of horizontal and also in a historic and in a, like many different ways to explore its roots in human culture and religions and their nutritional habits. And this is why fasting, religious fasting, around the Yom Kippur, Jews have to fast, but they can't drink water with it. So it's really truly pushing you into ketosis and into deuterium depleted, if you approach this from the biochemist point of view. It's everywhere practically. We just have not explored them enough. So I think eventually this is how these dots are connected nowadays.
Yeah, I've always loved listening to you on different talks, talking about how in the Bible there's several references and mentions of deuterium. It's fascinating to think that we've known about this for so long, Yet now it just seems in the last few years that people are really interested in looking at how it affects our health and our longevity, and especially the mitochondria, which is all the above. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So you would say that if someone was doing a diet that was more carnivore, that's not necessarily enough to deplete the deuterium. They would want to be basically eating bone marrow, right? Just eating the fat, that would be a little bit more deuterium depletion friendly.
Yeah, it's more like grass-fed animal
Grass-fed bone
source
marrow.
and
Yeah.
follow the ancient nutritional protocols. It means that you eat the hind steaks and the more fatty parts of that. Not
Yes.
everything is kosher, which surprised me very much. The sirloin and these very fancy meat products of the cow, they may not necessarily be kosher, but actually the fat part, the fatty, meaty part of the grass-fed animal is what is kosher. They have very specific butchering technology, meaning that they let the blood out, which has deuterium, especially the blood cells, and they don't eat those.
Mm.
They use various food preparation methods, especially if we go back to ancient times. That's practically like sourdough, and the source of even carbohydrates or like glycogenic substrates are also low in deuterium simply because of bacterial fermentation. And this is how most ancient food was prepared. So it's really an interesting and a very critical understanding from the historic and anthropology point of view, how we deal with deuterium depletion in our personal life, how much we understand of it, and what is the source of reliable low deuterium animal products. And this is what practically interiors and the hind steak, the fatty type of meat source of animals would accomplish for us. And as long as you eat that, and as you said, you become you just forget about doctors for that
Right.
matter. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's funny enough, I've been paying for health insurance. I'm going to go and do something. I'm going to get an eye because I just want to see where there is. But I really don't see doctors that, well, unless I shave and look in a mirror, but I really don't, lucky or not, but practically I lost my twin to cancer in 2006.
Oh,
And
wow.
they also found Barrett's esophagus. And a few years later, they found some kind of a tumor in one of my chest bones. It was, I think, 12 years ago. But I really don't pay like such a big deal or attention to this scenario because I know what to do. And, I just eat a very simple diet in the sense I eat once a day, like a main course in that sense. I take a few nibbles of, let's say, occasionally some bacon or seasonal fruits if they are available and they appeal to me. But other than that, I try to stay with a strict grass-fed source, animal interiors and ketogenic diet without carbohydrates and without additives and without industrial processing. I eat my steaks rare, meaning that I don't have them overcooked. I like the taste of liver and so on. I like the taste of bacon. And, in the ketogenic diet or the ketogenic cuisine, you can find there are now so many really delicious, good looking, appealing food products. I think it's really worth to explore for your health and your well-being. I never felt, I'm 60 years old. I never felt better. I mean, beyond, and it's 5 years in working ever since, like a more strict ketogenic diet with like of grass-fed fat source and meat source. But I wish I started earlier, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's one of those things, once you do it and you've done it for a while, I mean, you just kind of don't want to go back. It makes you feel so good. And I've heard you say on different interviews that you don't drink a lot of water. Is that correct?
I only drink water when I'm thirsty, and I only drink water as much as necessary to kill my thirst. But if I'm thirsty, I wait a few minutes. Let's see if it goes away. And the reason for that is you have an antidiuretic hormone. I personally think that, and this is not a medical advice, I personally think that water drinking is very dangerous because of the deuterium that it carries potentially. And also antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin is very critical for your well-being and to regulate these nanomotor functions. And also metabolic water is so precious that I don't want to kind of, waste it away. Simply, I think if you eat enough fat, then you can actually go without water. And this is most of the species do, especially animals in the desert. And truly, I think after all, this is just part of deuterium depletion and the ketogenic lifestyle. And yeah, if I don't have to kind of exercise or workouts, I don't exercise on purpose. I do 30 push-ups every morning. That's practically what I do. Walk the dog. That's it. But other than that, if I don't have to work outside, meaning that, and it's not too hot, I don't sweat, then I can go 1 or 2 days without drinking water. I think the longest it was 4 days. But I ate fat, I ate the pork crackers, the skin crackers, some bacon chips. What I do, I fry bacon, get the fat out, and just eat the rest of it as chips. And if I'm thirsty, I take a spoonful of fat. And it tastes just as good as water, meaning that it's really feels like drinking water after all. And there's not much difference between water and fat. Hydrogen is carried either by oxygen or carbons. But the main goal is to harvest these hydrogens and to use them for nanomotor functions. And truly, as you said, many different and various life cycles and processes come back. Fertility is one of the issues that we see changing by deuterium depletion, and now we start understanding the process better. Cycles, menstrual cycles returning to normal. So, and even though I don't have those, I can tell by my general functions and my ability to focus on things and kind of comprehend things and use my mind and my academic knowledge to write papers and keep discussions in a focused way. I don't have to have much efforts nowadays to accomplish all these or give lectures or talks and so on, which I do very often because I like to have this information updated time to time. And there's always some new things to talk about. And I love educating in the sense that people would understand, or at least just to get a glimpse of the importance of it. So after all, it made a big difference in my life, and I hope it does the same for others.
Absolutely. I'm really passionate about trying to spread the message about it a little bit more and just help people understand it on a little bit more of a basic level. And I want to jump back to the water thing for a second before we talk a little bit more about health. My listeners have heard me talk about this, but my dog, we took her to the vet, I guess in February, and she had elevated liver enzymes and she's only 8. And so I have kind of let my husband be in charge of her. So I told him, I said, I'm going to be in charge now, and started feeding her. We transitioned her over to a raw carnivore diet. And one of the first things that my husband was worried about was that she stopped drinking bowls and bowls of water, because she would drink 3 bowls of water per day. And now the bowl of water just sits there. And he's like, is she sick? Is something wrong? And I'm like, no, she she doesn't need it. She's an animal. Humans, we overthink the water. We need to have 8 glasses and we need to have this specific amount of water per day. As an animal, now that she's eating mostly just fat and organs and meat, and it's from a grass-fed, well-sustainable farm, she's just not interested in the water. And so I think that's something that we can kind of take a clue from when it
And
comes
what
to
kind
the
of dog
water.
is your dog?
She's a Lagotto Romagnolo. No one's ever heard of it. It's kind of the grandfather of the golden retriever and the poodle. It's an Italian water dog.
I see. We do have a German Shepherd, and she rarely ever drinks water.
Yeah.
We feed her with, and her ball is out there for days without her touching it.
Yeah.
And it's very important, because I think if you direct somebody to drink water without thirst or being thirsty, you actually drive that person into the dipsinogen form of diabetes insipidus, meaning that their ADH or antidiuretic hormone level will be suppressed, or hormone release will be suppressed. And it's really not just simply telling people to drink, because obviously your body has your senses to signal if you need anything from outside, anything from your environment. And water is one of the riskiest businesses. I think, after all, this would be the first major overhaul of medicine, if gluconomics really kicks in, is just to simply to name those proton sources that are safe, that are sufficient, and that are actually required by your system, by your body, by your cells to run a healthy course. Drinking water just simply because it's available, it's like really not founded. It's like telling somebody that just because you walked by a washroom, why don't you urinate or wash? Or when you just next to a couch, why don't you sleep 2 hours?
Right.
It's really not it makes no sense from the biochemistry point of view. It makes absolutely zero sense from the deuteronomics point of view. And I think if you experience or experiment with adopting your body to preserve water, metabolic water, deuterium depleted water that you produce, and you only drink when you are thirsty, I'm not saying don't drink water. No, that's not what I'm saying. You drink water when it's necessary. You sleep when you're tired, you eat when you're hungry, and you go to the bathroom when you need to use the bathroom. It's not just like your ad hoc kind of guessing of like, oh, there's a bottle of water, I should drink it. No, you shouldn't. You should wait till you get thirsty, and you should drink only as much as it is necessary to kill your thirst. And make sure that water is rainwater in ancient times, or it's a fat product like in the Bible, or it is actually deuterium depleted water that you can buy from various sources, and it's below 125 ppm. That's what I usually tell people if they are asking me like how I drink and what I drink.
Yeah. Because most water is at least what, 150 parts per million, typically 155, would you say?
Yeah, the oceanic water that surrounds California, it's 156.7 or in that range, depending on what temperature and where you sample the water. But tap water is what we measured is always above 145 ppm.
Mm.
And the bottled water we measured, we do have a database, we keep these values. The lowest we ever measured was 140 ppm, but that's a glacier water from France. If it a water source from high altitude, you are better off as far as its deuterium content, but nobody guarantees anything. And for that matter, it's just the best in my view is just to produce your water instead of drinking your water, and you supplement, you supply extra water from the environment when it's needed, and your thirst will be the guidance of that particular process.
And being in a ketogenic state will help that a little, you not be as thirsty, would you say?
Well, you are not going to be as thirsty if you have antidiuretic hormone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how you achieve that, again, that's another matter. But practically, diabetes insipidus is practically drinking plenty of water and urinating a lot without the interference, without the presence of glucose in your urine. That's why it's called diabetes insipidus. It's practically sour urination, because in medieval times, when the plenty of urine, which is called diabetes, was differentiated based, it was based on taste, because ancient medieval doctors, they tasted urine. So this is where the name comes from. And if there's a dipsynogenic or there's a polydipsic type of diabetes insipidus, and we see this in various psychiatric disorders, and they can lead to very severe and serious metabolic disbalances and abnormalities if you drink water excessively, which is, I think it's way out of control right now. And some of the population diseases, I believe, could partially be explained by excessive water drinking, which is high in deuterium.
I agree. That's one of the things I talk about quite a bit, is not drinking the gallon of water per day that people say that you should drink is just the worst advice for so many reasons. I think it's terrible, terrible advice, but I always talk about it from a mineral standpoint, but I didn't really think about it so much as just the high deuterium content that you're bringing into your body. And so I think a lot of people that maybe go on a ketogenic diet that is going to be supportive in depleting deuterium, but as long as you're drinking all that water, it's not enough to be as powerful as actually getting some depleted water and drinking that, would you say?
Yeah, in fact, this could backfire very easily. And this argument is practically a very solid biochemistry-based argument. You produce water, about 2,000 gallons of it a day, that is getting recycled in your mitochondria. You don't see this amount of water because it's not going to kind of pile up in your body. You constantly recycle this water in the mitochondria through the Sandier-Krebs cycle, which is a set of enzymatic reactions, 9 of them altogether, and 4 of those practically does nothing but recycles and rearranges water in the mitochondrial matrix. You can also calculate how many or what the volume or what is the mass of protons we move based on these nanomolar rotations. We did those biochemical calculations, and an average person, I would say 75 kilograms, no excessive physical activities, would recycle about 7.2 cubic meter of water, which is about 2.3 thousand liters of water each day. So you really have to think of your system as your circulatory. That's how much blood is circulating in your body, as a kinetic volume, after all, because you can calculate it. This is about the same amount of liquid that flows through your heart each day by the pumping function, as this is very true with the biochemistry of your cells. You need oxygen to link these two systems, and oxygen is carried by your blood, and oxygen is consumed in your mitochondria, and food provides the hydrogen. And there's also protons that are recycled in the mitochondria extensively, and the whole volume of the system operating is about 2.3 thousand gallons a day, which is quite significant. It's very dynamic system as far as protons recycling, and deuterium would actually break the system, the dynamics of it. So you just have to stay away from it.
Yeah. And I guess jumping to the topic of deuterium depleted water, that's something that I think has, again, gained a lot of popularity. There's a lot of people talking about it. Is there anyone that you would say probably should not try to do a deuterium depleted water protocol?
Well, there are ways of measuring deuterium in your breath and your saliva and your urine. And yeah, you want to know first, like, where you are in your deuterium load in that sense. And some people benefit from water. Some people need mitochondrial food source, low deuterium food source. If you have performing mitochondria, meaning that your mitochondria and your oxygen supply is sufficient, you may not respond to deuterium depletion through water dramatically, simply because your body is able to supply sufficient deuterium depleted water from the right food for your biological functions. And for that matter, maybe deuterium depleted water is not your first choice. You have to deal with light. You have to regulate your life cycle. You have to use your melanin to break water, to produce hydrogen gas, oxygen gas. We could talk about this for hours, but practically you need to be aware of everything that you are exposed to in your environment. And water is just part of it. Light cycles, the strength of photon pressure, your water breaking and hydrogen, oxygen, gas recycling systems, your microbiome. Those are all very important components. And if you actually dealt with all these components that you can actually regulate through your life cycle sufficiently, and then you still have medical issues, then you can turn to deuterium depleted water, in my views. It's not that, you start drinking deuterium depleted water and all of a sudden everything will be ripped in shape. No, that's not how it works. No, it takes time. In my case, it took years to kind of change. I had a tumor on my face, and it was a pigmentation. My mom wanted to, and people recommended just to go to and when I was giving my Vermont talk, I still had this tumor, and now it's gone. Nobody touched it, expected to just disappear. It takes years.
Yeah.
So you start depleting deuterium through life. Deuterium depleted water is just part of this whole scenario.
Right.
It's really a lifestyle that you have to. I don't like to use diet because that's usually kind of temporary, or just you have to be diseased or sick to try something to kind of solve or resolve through changing your food and feeding habits. But that's not what deuterium depletion is about. Deuterium depletion is a lifestyle. It's based on deuteronomics and biochemistry, and historic in anthropology and so on. It's practically just a very critical part of biological systems by employing these nanomotors. Those are proton um, powered nanomotors that have to be protected from deuterium. And the best way to protect them is practically just every minute in your life is you're living a lifestyle that is aware of what surrounds you and how to use your inner hormonal natural regulatory processes to be in harmony with your environment and consume just what is necessary to maintain your internal regulatory mechanisms intact. And I think that's the key to health in general, and that's the key to your well-being and to be able to be happy, because that actually covers a lot of your emotional, your mental, your physical, and your social skills and behaviors. And there's extensive literature on it. I don't want to go into those, but there's, as what you mentioned in the beginning, the many papers that I have been involved, not necessarily as a writer or as an author, but I also do edit a lot of papers and I do review a lot of papers. So, and deuteronomics is my main principle of giving advice to authors. I usually recommend, deuteronomics type of interpretations, meaning that the part of discussions would reflect how deuteronomics would fit into any particular medical paper that I review or edit for the literature. So, and I do work for major medical journals. So this knowledge, as you kind of, pointed out, is kind of part of your life in general. Yeah. It's not just a bottle of water. It's you have to learn enough, and you have to, when you drive into a gas station, the first thing you do is you look for your gas pump and you pick the best gasoline, and you don't put diesel fuel in your gas engine and vice versa. So it's part of your life, these decision making processes, and one of these processes is related to deuterium depletion and consume the right fuel for your body, and that's practically grass-fed animal products that can supply this deuterium depleted water for your system. If you're still thirsty, then get a 105 ppm water or whatever you have around you or have access to, and drink very little of it. It's not expensive. It is expensive if you start showering with it and start doing all kind of drink 4 liters of it or a gallon of it, and then you just,
and there's no reason to do that, right? There would be no reason to drink like 10 ppm or 5 ppm straight. That may cause some issues, would you think?
Oh yeah, after all, and you save money, like going to doctors. You don't have to sit and pay for medications, and I mean it's a very different life. I was surprised myself to learn just from myself and others how helpful it is in certain scenarios. But my medical bill in the last, I would say, 15 or 20 years is very minimal for that.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, I love how you say that we have to look at it as a lifestyle. I've had people ask me before, should I do the water? Should I buy the deuterium depleted water? And I'm like, how are your circadian rhythms? Are you surrounded by non-native EMF? How's your diet? Are you eating an ancestral diet? How's your relationship to nature? Are you going outside? Are you grounding? Are you doing cold therapy? Are you doing anything with red light? These things, they're natural ways that our body can support depletion. And if you just go straight to the water, it's not going to be as effective, would you say?
Yeah, you learn, just look into the sun in the early morning when it comes
Mhm.
up, and look into the sun in the evening when it sets, because those are the
The red light.
colors that your eyes, your melanin, your
Mhm.
retina will process and regulate your life cycle, to your
Yes.
circadian rhythm. And it's very important part of being healthy. And in the meantime, you really have to spend a great deal of time practically just to look for the safe food source.
Mhm.
If those are not readily available for you, meaning that you don't trust them, or necessary, you don't know what the source or where they are from. And in the meantime, you have to kind of, use your mind simply just to stay away from media, stay away from advertisements, stay away from, you
Yes.
haven't had enough of this, you hadn't had drank enough of that, you need this much of that, you need that. No, really your body knows better what you need, what you don't.
Mhm.
It's not through your ears or your eyes what you have to consume. It's by your hunger, your thirst, your other senses. Just because nowadays people go by kind of their inputs from outside, from
External.
unreliable
Yes.
sources, and for
Yep.
marketing purposes.
Mhm.
And as long as you fall for those, your health is not necessarily the highest priority for those marketing efforts. It's
Mm-mm.
practically they go after your money.
Mhm.
So you have to be careful with that. And
Mhm.
when you actually develop something like a lifestyle or a pattern that you would like to you would like to employ, or you would like to use for yourself, you have to base that on biochemical information, or just to know how your body works. What is the source of energy? What is the source of your well-being? And for that matter, since you're part of nature, it doesn't matter where you live or how you approach this, and light and radiations and food and everything that surrounds you will eventually affect your health, simply because those factors surround you. And you have to be very, very cautious of what and how much of that you consume,
Mhm.
um, based on your body's natural signals. And you need to kind of follow this lifestyle, or at least to try and devote and comply with some of these basic educational. It's not, again, I teach this simply because it works for me, it works for others.
Mhm.
I have seen people really turning around, and literally, I mean, there are, cases and friends and so on, including my own case, but I don't want to emphasize that too much. It's just practically a good life experience of helping myself, helping others. In the meantime, to educate students, to give them credits for their doctoral degrees, and kind of push them into the deep kind of realms of proton tunneling and proton destabilization processes in mitochondria and nanoconfinement and so on. We can make this very complicated, but I don't
Yes.
want to. I just I just want to kind of emphasize that the knowledge and the team and the faculty that is working on this is very, very devoted, very solid.
Mm.
So we are not on radio, we are not on TV, we are mostly in the peer-reviewed medical literature and scientific literature. But when we translate this knowledge to the lay kind of set of terms, then we communicate information that is very well established in the medical literature. And there are many arguments and reviews and rebuttals that we have to go through to get this information to the public. And this is, as teachers and educators, this is our job. And practically, genomics is just I would say, the new crucial point of understanding some of the epidemiological disease scenarios or epidemics that we see in the form of, you name it, almost. It's like, if you are over 40 and you are not taking at least a handful of medications, or 50 for that matter, something is wrong. And I think it's the other way around.
Yeah,
if
I
you
agree.
take any medication at any kind of part of your life, unless you absolutely need it, because none of these matters that we talked about covered: life cycle, circadian rhythm, grass-fed food, staying in ketosis, listening to your body signals, follow our ancestors' routine of staying healthy and staying in harmony with nature, stay away from certain foods that are not for us, kind of beating our desires and beating our, addictions for that matter. I mean, that's the key to health. And I just have no better way of dealing with this than knowing about deuterium as much as possible and study this as deep and thorough as possible to give something to people, mostly the naturopathic or the integrated medical field. That's my approach.
I love that. And would you say that, so let's the whole lifestyle thing, I hope people understand what you're really emphasizing is a lifestyle where the body is able to naturally deplete deuterium a bit more would be the primary focus. And someone should really do that before they go out and invest in deuterium depleted water. But if they have been doing the lifestyle changes for a while, and let's say they have more of a chronic immediate health condition that they want to solve or to get some support with that water, is there ever a reason for someone to, like I said earlier, to drink anything under, let's say, like 100 ppm? Would anyone ever really need to go lower than that, or what would you say would be a good place for people to start?
Again, I'm not a clinician, so I don't know exactly what ppm water would be the best to drink in any particular disease process. You may want to talk to clinicians. Dr. Dawson, Daflar, she can help you with that kind of argument. So they need to be trained and
you need to work with a practitioner.
Sometimes, yes, or Gabor Shomya, he wrote a book, Defeating Cancer.
The cancer,
saw those. There are clinicians who apply this knowledge. I'm just kind of the teacher, the biochemist guy. I'm just the know-how biochemist, expert, just to kind of define mechanisms and to link them with disease process, so on. But in the general kind of knowledge terms, I would recommend, or I would say, that drinking water between 105 and 125 anywhere, that would be compatible with a good grass-fed ghee or bacon type deuterium depleted water, because the food that we have therapeutic value is in that range, below 120 ppm. That's what you consume in the form of healthy food. And you should probably look at Dr. Shomya. He has a preprint paper out that now they fed tumor hosting animals with deuterium depleted egg yolk and egg protein. So the diet itself already has an effect on survival, and when you combine it with deuterium depleted water, you can enhance that effect. But now we have experimental evidence. I just wrote a comment about this very variable, but it's been a longer waiting type of data. Now we use MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, to measure deuterium in human tissues and in biological products. And so it's going to be part of diagnostics and therapeutics. And we are actually getting closer and closer to the translational applications of deuteronomics or food source or food base. The deuterium depleted water kind of approach has been published and has been explored, and it's continuously kind of presented and discussed in the medical literature. Now, since we have kind of advised the field back in 2018, since we started really talk about food, and we focused on the mechanism of how deuterium depleted food depletes deuterium for our body in the form of deuterium depleted water, and how it gets recycled and so on, and what disease processes, including cancer, obesity, and diabetes, this could be useful, which are very significant disease epidemics nowadays. After all these scenarios seem to now nicely merge and produce very valuable data that can be applied in the clinics sometime in the future.
Wow. So it's still evolving, it's still emerging. And I think the main point might be if that's something that you're interested in doing the water, that perhaps working with an actual clinician to help guide you through that would be more of a prudent thing to do, would you say?
Yeah, so again, you always have to or should talk to your doctor or doctors, because they have an advice. You may have various sources of information, and you may want to talk it over with your doctor, or provide some of these papers and give some of these papers to your doctors, so they can learn about this while you're kind of making those choices, or bring them to the table. You can speed up the process with deuterium depleted water, but again, you cannot kind of substitute with deuterium depleted water for the food source of. You can combine the two with additional benefits, but again, you have to watch your body signals of really truly, are you hungry, are you thirsty, are you sleepy, are you tired, you want sunlight, you want to kind of take a hike, those kind of things, which would be part of your routine to actually utilize the deuterium depleted resources in your environment. But it takes, because we lost our smell, because animals, they do smell deuterium depleted water. Actually, humans, there was a study showing that if you put deuterium depleted water in your taste buds, the action potential of those nerve, kind of the input nerve actions would change, meaning that humans, we could taste and we could smell deuterium depleted water from various water sources. I can taste and I can tell what is the deuterium, roughly what is the deuterium depleted of the water that I'm drinking, if it's not carbonated or if it's not processed if it's natural water source. So based on the viscosity, based on the sweet, actually heavy water is more sweet.
Really?
So yeah, there's actually, if you go to my website, which is lazloboros.com, or if you go to some of the papers that discuss, or to my Facebook page, you can see a number of publications that actually focus on these, because I find these very, very interesting and very important to share. We lost our ability to taste deuterium in food and in the environment. You may be able to taste low deuterium food simply because of the taste of it. It's, a good grass-fed steak. It just tastes
Oh, I
so
can definitely
good.
taste the difference for sure. Yeah.
Compared to the junk that you buy in various like farm-based,
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
they sell you, you can tell by taste that the meat quality it's if it's deuterium depleted. But we could do the same with water. We could tell the
Wow.
difference. And since we lost this ability, or at least you have to retrain yourself, I can tell if the water is deuterium depleted, if it's not carbonated. But yet again, since we lost our senses, we have to be very careful of what we consume, where we get them, how much of that we consume, how much we are willing to pay for these kind of recommended food or nutritional items, especially when they are plant source, because those are not the safest for us. And those are really truly not what we are designed to process and be able to kind of preserve our health. And we should live longer. I think we should live healthier, and I think we should live happier in general. And the key to that is just to be able to taste deuterium again. But until we learn this, we have to kind of find sources of
Think about it.
deuterium
Yeah.
depleted stuff. Yeah.
I have one more question. I've heard of a tribe of people that have been studied that were at a source of more deuterium depleted water, where women were having babies into their 60s. They were living, well past 100. It's a Siberian tribe, I believe. Are you familiar with that research at all, or have you?
Yeah, the Caucasian mountains and in Siberia, people live longer. When I was a teenager, there was on Hungarian TV, there was a kind of a We Got Talents kind of show, and they had a group of dancers, and the youngest was 115 years old, and they were still
What?
dancing. They were from Russia. Yeah, I mean, we were just stunned. And they were just fine, after all. I think just like very similar to the Human Genome Project, there has to be a Human Deutenome Project, simply just to map a human beings or just to map the deuterium content and how deuterium is distributed in our body. In general, longevity and healthiness is just remembering my old days. I did see a lot of old people. I grew up in a small village in Hungary, and they were really, really old, and still be able to kind of carry on without going to doctors too often, meaning that they didn't even know where the doctors were, or they had a chitty chat with them, but practically they were able to preserve their own. And as soon as the industrial food supply came in, all this changed. And changed dramatically. In Hungary, they started like mid 70s. And as an example, when I was in early 70s, I grew up in a city or a town of 25,000 people, and we had one lady with breast cancer, and it was talked about. It was a very unusual, rare event there.
Wow.
In fact, these tribes that you are talking about, they don't have a native word for cancer.
Wow.
Or diabetes, because they don't have these diseases. They had to borrow those words from other dialects simply because they didn't have cancer for that matter.
Wow.
And the fertility is very important because it seems like the oocyte, the female reproductive system, locks in all the follicles in the in their female reproductive organ, and they have about 400,000 follicles in the ovaries, and about 400 to 500 of them become eventually ruptured or matured to be fertilized with a sperm. And it happens in the female babies, it happens in pregnancy by the third month, you have the baby's ovaries with all the follicles developed. And after that, they go into a dormant state. They are predominant. They are surrounded by follicular cells, so they don't really get involved in metabolism. And it doesn't matter what you eat. Well, in the first trimester, you may throw up, you may have nausea. you know this process because you have babies. So your body, and you fast, you practically keep yourself in ketosis, you know it or not, but practically that's what your body is trying to do. If you eat too much, you throw up, simply because your baby is trying to limit deuterium for these follicles as much as possible. So that's locked in life. It's different in males because they produce sperm constantly. And their sperm's DNA or chromosome deuterium content is different from that of the females. The females can eat anything. Their oocyte, the haploid DNA or chromosomes, they don't gain deuterium, but the sperm would. So eventually, in nature, we know that the males that go to a successful mating fight, meaning that they are lowest in deuterium because their nanomotors and muscles and all those abilities are the best in that particular male generation, they will have the chance to mate. So nature still kind of depletes deuterium in the sperm too, but it's a different natural scenario. And we are exploring all these marvels and beauties of nature. And we do a interpretation, meaning that we interpret those findings from the point of view of deuterium. So practically, it's almost like you can explain all kind of weird stuff that happens in nature. You may not understand it from just looking at it, but once you talk as a deuteronomicist, or once you apply deuteronomics to those particular biological principles, you gain a little better insight of why things happen, in what order, and for what reason.
I agree. It's something that once you learn about it, you can't really see things the same way anymore. That's why.
Can I ask a quick question? Because you
sure.
told me in your email that you are 23 weeks?
27 weeks now.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Was your husband also on deuterium depleting protocols, or it was only you?
Just me. We
I
had, I just turned 43. And so we had decided we're going to try for the baby. And we had been trying for a couple of years and just not successful. And so I changed my whole lifestyle too. I didn't just drink the water. I mean, that's when I got very interested in circadian rhythms. I was, anytime I could be in the woods, I was in the woods. I started cold plunging in ice water, 30-degree ice water, going out on my deck in a bathing suit in the winter and ice plunging, red light therapy, just everything I could. And then a ketogenic diet, very high fat, bone marrow, as healthy as I could. And I did do water from September to December. And then one of my friends that we're all kind of connected with Dr. Cruz and a lot of his teachings, he said, well, if you're going to try for the baby, then stop the water and stop the cold plunging in January. And so I stopped it in January, and then that was the month that it worked. And so that's what, during all this time is when I was just super interested in the whole concept of deuterium, because there's so many women that are struggling to get pregnant, not just my age. Yeah, I'm older to try to get pregnant, but there's women in their 30s and in their 20s. And, when I was exploring different fertility clinics, they were all booked up 6 months in advance.
Mhm.
And then you go and it's full of younger women too. So it's a major problem right now.
Yeah, because if you think about it, sperm is propelling itself, the sperm cells, using these nanomotors. They swim in a liquid where viscosity is very critical to reach the egg, the oocyte that was released from a mature follicle. And all these factors eventually add up and would help fertilization by deuterium depletion. I would most desirable on both sides, but obviously it would make a big difference even just if you follow a certain lifestyle. I do walk wintertime in -10 Celsius, I would say,
Wow.
half naked, and people stop me, the fishermen.
sure.
There's these ice fishing guys.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, professor, isn't it cold a little? I'm like, yeah,
Feels
it's
good.
cold, but the sun is out,
Right.
and that's all I need for that matter. And okay, you just kind of have to use and utilize your knowledge and whatever is available in your environment, and just learn about this as much as possible.
Yeah,
I think
understanding
eventually.
if it's cold outside, you need to be cold, especially if you're a northern haplotype. I mean, my haplotype is H2, so that's perfect for somebody who needs to be exposed to cold in the winter. But the way that we live our lives in the winter is like a perpetual summer. We have lights on until midnight, and the TV and the heat in the car, and we never get cold. And that's one of the things that helps our body to deplete deuterium is being cold. Correct? Yeah.
Yeah, it's mitochondria have these decoupling kind of
Yes.
proton tunnel. It would take forever to explore all these mechanisms, and I apologize, I don't want to kind of go into too much details, because but it totally makes sense, what you're using as deuteronomics type of knowledge. When we started deuteronomics, I remember in 2011 or 2010, I called my friend Dr. Gabor Shomiri and told him, I was in Arizona at that time, and I told him that, hey, Gabor, I think mitochondria produce deuterium depleted water in the matrix if you eat the right food. And he hung up the phone because, he didn't think it was like that important, necessary. It was a funny story, because after that, we published a number of papers, actually a lot of papers on the topic. But even the experts who studied water, deuterium depleted water, is not readily just that easy to process, that there's a source of deuterium depleted water in our body, and for that we have to eat the right food and have the right lifestyle. And cold, and I take showers in cold water usually. I walk wintertime half naked, simply because I think, after all, this all is part of the same story, and that is practically just preserve your health through natural processes, and deuterium depletion is a huge part of it.
Yeah, I always say the further away we get from the way our ancestors lived, the sicker we become. And that can be food, lifestyle, technology, just looking at your life as a whole. Again, the further away that you are from what your ancestors did, the worse your health will be.
You're right on.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful. I feel like I could probably talk to you another couple hours at least, but my audience might not hang out for that. So where can people find you? You've mentioned your website and some of your work. What's the best way to find you?
So LazloGBoros.com is my website, and submolecular medicine at Vrije Universiteit, Amsterdam, is where the course is. And just practically looking around on YouTube for various talks. We have a Deuteronomics YouTube channel. I also have a fumarate hydratase channel for the English presentations. I do have a Hungarian channel, which is managed by Esther Boros. She compiled a lot of international and Hungarian videos and educational material, and also the English ones for that kind of setup of talks and information. And you can find us on YouTube, the BBD Health. We have a Hungarian audience, but there are many original English sources published there. And I also have a Facebook profile. I don't use my Twitter or Instagram. I mostly publish everything on Facebook because I cite everything. So I'm not worried about the kind of the fact checkers, because whatever I say is always supported by original citations and publications. So, and there are a number of papers that I published, and there is a lot of papers that I edited, and you can find those if you go to PubMed, which is the academic source of peer-reviewed medical literature, and you just type in my name, Boros LG, or Boros and Shomyai, or any combination of authors that we publish papers, and you're going to see a number of papers related to deuteronomics. All the tracer studies that we did in the past, we are actually talking about those from the deuteronomics point of view, and that's part of the course to teach students how to use deuteronomics for scientific arguments. And this nomenclature is just developing because deuteronomics, depletion, we just generate these words and introduce them in the medical literature. So scientists and also editors and authors, they can be more familiar with the process. But it's, again, my biggest kind of compliment from science is practically that deuteronomics never let me down. And I'm you take a big risk when you go to a kind of a theater. You ask the audience to blow in a tube just to collect their breath, and you blindly interpret the data, and you ask them to bring some water samples from the bathroom too, and just kind of hide them in the samples. And you're able to 100% certainty, you can tell which water samples came from human breath and which water samples came from the drinking well. Wow. And I've done this twice, meaning that totally blindly, just trusting deuteronomics as it is, it never let me down. And as a scientist and as an individual, and we have been challenged many times by many, media and professional outlets. And we were able, reviewers and editors, we answered all the questions. So far, we answered all the questions, I think, with very rigorous and very solid scientific basic and foundation. And I think that's how and why we keep doing this, simply because it just never let us down.
I love it. Well, thank you again. This has just been very, very educational, and I hope that my audience enjoys it as much as I did. Thank you again for being here today. Thank
you so much. And I hope the baby is going to learn deuteronomics as fast as she
I'll
can.
be I'm already teaching him.